Hello and welcome back to Premier Injuries. I've got a beaming smile on my face, mainly because I'm on here with my on-air husband, but it's not been the best in terms of fantasy team or fantasy Euro. We're going to get through that today. But before we get into all the analysis, we've got the biggest injury updates. We've got some fantastic data to go through. Make sure to like the video, comment below and subscribe to the channel because we've got so much good free content coming out. We've got the daily data shows. We've got some really good exclusive interviews, a huge one actually coming up this week, and just so much great stuff that we are putting together behind the scenes here. But as always, before we get into the analysis and things like that, I also do have to ask Ben, how are you doing? Are you feeling good in terms of fan team and Euro fantasy?
Euro fantasy, what a load of bollocks that is, by the way. I cannot be chewed. I want to set and forget. I don't want to be messing on the captaincy, bringing players in and out. No, I've got absolutely zero love for Euro fantasy. And fan team, I'm teetering on the edge of those cash places. A little bit disappointing in this second phase of round of games. I would say C+, all right, but could do better. And slightly worried about, what is coming up in terms of selections and starters for Matchday 3, because I think this will be a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, I think this is one of the big things we're going to talk about here. But before we talk about the actual match days, fixtures and everything, we need to know the injury updates. And of course, you're the expert on that. Is there any big news that we need to be prepared for before we go into match day 3?
Not a great deal been happening, if the truth be known, certainly not to key players. People asking about Harry Maguire and the possibility of him being in a position to potentially start. I think it would have been a lot more clear cut if England had beat Scotland and secured top spot in that group. As it stands, we're going through. It's just in which place and who we're likely to play. And for that reason, it could be that Gareth, again, maybe looks to err on the side of caution. It could be, I would expect Maguire to get minutes, certainly, but whether it's a start or not, I'm not entirely sure. Elsewhere, nothing major coming to light at this point in time. One thing I have had me bee in me bonnet about this week was Benjamin Pavard, France, the concussion stroke, not concussion, stroke conscious, unconscious. I actually watched the original game against Germany. I think we were on a podcast actually, so I caught it out the corner of me. I didn't have the volume on. I seen the challenge from Goossens, and it was, it is what it is. I didn't pay too much close attention, didn't have the volume on, and I assumed because he stayed on the pitch that everything was fine and it was just a heavy knock. It wasn't until around about sort of 12, 16 hours later, I seen the post-match comments and I heard the fact that he had suggested he had been out cold for 10 to 15 seconds, which again, it raises alarm bells for me. I looked at the UEFA educational charter, which specifically outlines concussion protocol. They talk about how players need to be withdrawn, and they talk about how federations and associations need to write to UEFA. They need a written request for players to return to play when they're being taken out. They talk about graded protocol, in which case, they have players in light training. If they come through one day, then they can do, maybe full sprints, and it's graduated, and it's around about a 7-day period turnaround. So I fully expected Pavard to miss a match day 2, and ultimately the French Federation to get a bit of a slap on the wrist and say, what the hell's going on here? I didn't expect what I seen. It was that the UEFA have accepted the French Federation's rationale for leaving Pavard on the pitch. They said he actually wasn't unconscious, even though the player admitted he was. And they also said that, that the team doctor hadn't spotted any clear evidence that the player was concussed. but there's no independent assessment there. We know that the first knock on the head isn't the one we really need to be worried about. This is all about secondary concussion and the chances of suffering serious brain damage, some impairment. The risks are significantly increased with a secondary concussion. And we all know, when we talk about the game at the highest level, it's so fast. It's, look at Raul Jimenez, it can be something pretty innocuous. And we're not talking about then a player is of missing a game or 2 games. We're not even talking about a player having to retire. We could be talking about, life-changing moment. And I just question, why take the risk? We've seen it in the last World Cup with Norden Amrabat, Morocco. He was hospitalised and he was back on the pitch within 5 days. And you just wonder, are they just playing lip service? And what will it actually take for somebody to really make a stand against this?
Yeah, we here at Premier Injuries hope that there is a change in that sort of attitude there, because it does seem at times players' lives are being put at risk. We do have to turn our attentions, though, to the concerns around our teams, and the real worry going into game week 3 is rotation. Ben, do you think that this is overhyped, or is this a real problem with a lot of teams that have nothing to play for in Matchday 3?
This is real. This isn't just talk or, like I say, just playing a bit of a lip service. This managers will look to rotate players. We're coming off the back of a condensed season on minimal pre-season program, huge number of games, players carrying knocks and niggles anyway. And you would question, why would you risk the players in what effectively is a dead rubber when you have the knockout phase just around the corner? So, we're not talking about having squads of 25 players or 26 or 24 in some instances of, 24 average players. We've got, there's some really, really strong squads in there with a lot of depth. And, so those players who are coming in, arguably, could probably be in that first 11 anyway. So there's no reason as to why, managers and coaches won't look to rotate. And that's going to be the difficult thing for us as fantasy managers, just trying to identify which managers are likely to do so and which players are the ones most at risk of missing out.
Well, this is why we held off to recording as soon as the Spain game was over, because we wanted to make sure that we've got kind of every avenue covered, because going into that Spain game, one would assume that Spain would win and they wouldn't have much to play for in that final game. Same with England. And we're kind of seeing actually there's maybe a few more games than we thought have a lot to play for. But then some of those teams are kind of almost dampening our interest in them. England, Harry Kane, he was somebody that I captained this week. And now I just think, is he worth actually having in the team? Because I think the team tactics don't suit him. In terms of the fixtures as well, I know that you don't enjoy it too much, but in terms of Euro Fantasy, Ben, you've got 2 days of 2 fixtures, 2 days of 4 fixtures. So make sure that you manage your subs and your captaincies accordingly. So if you do change your captaincy to, say, Belgium or to the Netherlands, then you can't have Kevin De Bruyne and then Depay because they play on the same day. And it's a little bit annoying because I think that they're both pretty good captains. But at the same time, there's a lot of things to revisit. Now, in terms of the teams that have their groups tied up, I think it is just Belgium, Italy and Netherlands. So there are quite a few teams with a lot to play for. And I guess we do have to start off with the 3 Lions, Ben. They play a difficult Czech team. Is it just defenders that are a good pick, though? I mean, you're saying urge away from Maguire. Maybe John Stones is the only player really from the 3 Lions now that you can actually consider, because I've really gone off Harry Kane.
Well, I mean, I hope John Stones stays in that start 11. He was my cheap way into that England backline for what I perceived as being one of those more nailed-on starters. We've seen Gareth rotate his fullbacks in that second game. So for me in that back line, unless you're going to go Pickford, it's got to be Stones. And even when you look at, who could potentially come in with, he could rotate, and I'm not considering those fullbacks moving in, because I know Kyle Walker can, and I don't think he's going to start Connor Cody. Had they beaten Scotland, it would be a lot more clear cut. I think he would have threw Harry Maguire straight in there, but I think it's going to be Maguire minutes from the bench, and for that reason, I think John Stones has got to start.
Yeah, this is the worrying thing is I think England should have used that Scotland game just to see off the group and then manage their way through the Czech game a little bit easier and go into the groups. But now none of their big players can really be rested. But at the same time, something needs to change. So I think there's a little bit of almost flux in that team, that there's going to be a few changes because it's not worked so far. And at the same time, that just makes me really unconfident of investing in anybody apart from Stones. But the one kind of silver lining is that England's defence has been exemplary. They've had one of the best in terms of XG conceded. Looking at them through this tournament, I think they've got the second best XG conceded. The Czech team as well have struggled with getting goals. Very lucky in terms of the XG boosted by penalties. So if you take out the penalty, they actually only had 1.87 XG, which is the bottom half amongst teams in the Euros. And actually only Italy are the team that have a better XG conceded over these games. So it is one to consider. Then kind of maybe looking at some of their players, we'll kind of move through defence and specific attacking targets as well. But Denmark, they do have to come out and play. But are they just not good enough, Ben? I mean, there is obviously the terrible tragedy of what's happened with Eriksen. I think that's knocked the team a little bit. If they do get 3 points, they could possibly go through as one of the one of the best bottom place teams. I think if they get enough in terms of goal difference, they might pip Finland, so they'd have to score 3 goals against Russia. But is it the story already over for Denmark? I mean, they're playing a pretty tough Russia side to break down.
They are, under different circumstances, on a different day. They would have picked up at least a point against Finland. I'm fairly confident of that. And if you get the Denmark, certainly that opening 45 minutes against Belgium, they can show they can go head to head with one of the best teams in the world. They need that over 90 minutes. And look, it's a huge task ahead of them. The Russians gaining a little bit of confidence, a little bit momentum. I think it was Moranchuk, excelled in that second game in his start, and they've got a bit of a threat going forward. So it's difficult. I mean, is 3 points going to be enough? For me, I just think it might be a little bit of a bridge too far. They've had the wind kicked out of the sails. They leave the tournament, with their head held high. They'll nobody can say any different about this Danish team. The fact that they performed that the way they did against Belgium, again, is testament to the group, the solidarity, and the mental strength of their players. But maybe that the manner of the defeat, it says, maybe just took a little bit of wind out of the sails, and no, I can't see the Danish lads progress, unfortunately.
I have mentioned, obviously, Belgium, Italy, Netherlands have won their groups. But I think maybe... Do you think that the rotation risk is too much with them? The only kind of caveat that I can give, or maybe confidence to some, is that Frank de Boer has kind of said that the Netherlands team won't be rotating the team too much, just because he wants them to get used to this new system that he is deploying with them. So he's kind of indicated that probably they won't have too much change, which is a positive. But, realistically, there probably will be some changes. Do you think it's too much of a gamble to be transferring in or relying on the Netherlands assets going forward, or the Belgium or the Italian ones, or will they want to kind of continue on this form? I think somebody like Kevin De Bruyne might be a bit different because he needs those minutes under the belt, but Lukaku, Immobile, and maybe Depay for Netherlands, are they going to be starting, or are they going to be making cameo appearances?
I mean, that's a big question. There's two schools of thought here. One, you're starting with these guys and you're maybe looking at a withdrawal somewhere between, the 45 and 60-minute mark. And therefore you're hoping, can they do it within that, while they're on the pitch? Or did they just remove them out of the firing line and, maybe give them a couple of minutes as a cameo at the end? I mean, it's a massive, massive call. For Roberto Martinez, for example, he'll be looking at those players within his squad. You're managing an international squad as well. You've got some big personalities. You've got some big fish in a small pond at club level. And then they come to the international stage, but you've still got that big ego. And you need to manage temperaments. You need to manage those players. And within the group, because you never know when you're going to be needed to be called upon. And I think just for me, I think you've got to be looking at that group and thinking, right, well, actually, I've got to bring them in because these guys, one, they need to experience the football. They need to try and maintain some kind of level of fitness, a little bit of sharpness. You're not going to get that. They talk about training and they're not really training between games. So the guys that are sitting on the bench are probably becoming more deconditioned as the tournament goes on because they're not just, they're not getting that high level minutes competitively. And also, these guys who are sitting on the bench are thinking, well, hold on, we're top of the group, we've won the group, and we're still not being, he hasn't got the trust in us. So, yeah, I mean, as great as the likes of Lukaku and everybody has been, I think, Roberto Martinez will want to protect those. And you still got the likes of Batshuayi, Benteke, players Benteke had a great finish to the season for Palace. And I'm sure he's jumping at the bit to go out and again, just, show what he can do. And that's what I would expect most sort of national team managers to be thinking along those lines.
Do you think that maybe Group F, the group of death, has possibly the best opportunity in assets? You got Germany, you got France, you got Portugal, but even Hungary have all got an opportunity to go through. It's really kind of tense in that group there. But because there's so much at stake, because there's so many big teams and so many opportunities there, does it make it hard to justify any kind of asset acquirement apart from maybe the German ones? Because you look at France, they haven't looked at their best. Mbappe, Griezmann haven't been firing on all cylinders. I'd say Cristiano Ronaldo has been fantastic, but you've just seen them concede 2 goals today, so you can't really trust in their defence. Bernardo Silva, Fernandes haven't been great. And then you look at the Hungary side, there's not many assets that you would purchase there. So Germany, they were rampant against Portugal. They were probably unlucky against France not to score. They conceded an unlucky own goal. Are they possibly the only side that you'd be looking for assets in?
Well, certainly the Hungary result is through the cat amongst the pigeons, and Germany bounced back in style against Portugal. And look, if Hungary have got to go out and play now. So, they cannot be sitting in, they cannot defend it. It cannot be a backs to the wall performance. I think they've got to open up and they've got to try and get a victory against Germany. And that'll play into their hands. And, we've seen, I thought Goossens was absolutely tremendous tonight. His first goal that got disallowed. What a finish that was, by the way. So very, very unfortunate. And yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised the way the Germans played tonight. I thought they were fantastic. So yeah, of course they're going to attract a lot of attention. Fortunately, I owned Goossens, Havertz will probably be on a lot of people's radar. And look, yeah, we're going to these final games, and really, they need to win this. So for me, it makes those German assets a lot more appealing.
Let's go into the assets then. I think we've kind of covered some of the standout do's and don'ts of certain teams, but we will go into other teams as well, because it's a really difficult situation here, managing, because in fan team you've got such finite transfers. If you do want to take an extra one on top of your allowed, then you do take a hit. So if you do take a hit, you want to be taking a really good hit. So starting off with the defence, I do want to start actually with Denmark. I think they kind of offer some interesting ones. Millet is somebody that you and I were quite fancied upon, but I'm looking at him as just a 4.5 possible clean sheet, because I think looking at the Denmark team, Schmeichel has the worst XG prevented in the Euros, but some of the mistakes have been theirs. They do have one goal conceded to a mistake from themselves, but some of them have also just been unlucky opportunities. The 2 goals scored by Belgium weren't ridiculously high XG. They weren't overperformed by Belgium in that game, and I think that they were unlucky to lose it. So in terms of XG, the side haven't actually allowed that many good opportunities against them. And adding to that, Russia are in the bottom 4 for XG so far in the tournament. So they're not really good goal scorers. They're not really creating good opportunities, and a bit over-reliant, as we said in the previews, on Golovin and Zuba. So really, could it be a Schmeichel making a few saves from the fact that Russia take a lot of long shots? Could it be Millet just getting that clean sheet, or is that a risk too far?
Ooh, I don't know. It's a tough call, that Denmark squad. I think the first game back, or the first proper start following the Christian Eriksen incident, I think it helped the fact that it was against Belgium, the Scandinavian rivals. You want to go up, that they're pumped, and maybe a lot of that energy, a lot of that enthusiasm, a lot of that fight for Eriksen galvanized the squad. Maybe it's just like it's been a bit of a kick in the teeth for them, and I really don't know how they're going to respond. I thought Russia looked a little bit better, if the truth be known. I think that there was a marked improvement between Matchday 1 and Matchday 2. Whether that's reflected in the data or not, I'm sure you will tell me. But certainly on the eye, I thought Miranchuk offered something a little bit different. And I think it's a tough game for Denmark, and it's probably one that I wouldn't be looking to touch.
I mean, for me, one of the things, this is why I raised the possibility of Schmeichel's, the fact that they've had 19 shots but only 4 on target. So I thought there was that opportunity of save points in the fan team kind of metric there. But all it takes is one opportunity. They've only scored 1 goal, but it only takes 1 opportunity from Russia, and then that is wiped out. And I think that in the circumstances, the fact that they've been underperforming anyway, it's a bit like the discussions that you and I had throughout the season with Brighton. Good underlying numbers, but they're not matching them. And that's probably for a reason, because they're just lacking in that little bit of quality there. And also, let's be realistic, they're probably struggling with a lot of the psychology of the loss of Eriksen as well. It has impacted the team probably more than we can even know. So going forward, I think maybe you're right to be a little bit worried on that. 2 defences that I am looking at. One is probably a bit differential. The other one is a team that have a fairly good final one, but they're both from the same group. It's Sweden and Spain. I think Sweden, I like the goalkeeper shout again. The Swedish defence has conceded a lot of opportunities, but none of them have gone into the back of the net. Olsen himself has 5 saves, 1.4 XG prevented. And I think going into that final game, they can be relatively confident. The Poland team have not played terribly well. I think that obviously Spain struggle with an aerial threat team, whereas Sweden, that's just water off a duck's back for them. So I think that they can probably manage every type of play that Poland have going forward. And they'll just want to almost defend it out. They don't need to win. They'll probably go through near the top or second because they just need that 1 point, and then they're on 5. And unless there's like a freak result with Slovakia, then they'll probably be fine. And then with Spain, they're playing Slovakia, and I think that realistically Slovakia did well against Poland in that first game, but this is a much better defence. And I do see Spain probably winning that game. It'll be a difficult one for them though, but I think that they will keep a clean sheet in that one because they'll have most of the possession. So I don't know if the two from the same group there, if they appeal to you, because it's going to be almost really high budget in terms of an Alaba from the Spain defence. That's the only one that I trust in. But Sweden's defence offers a lot of cheaper alternatives.
Swedes, I think they've only conceded once in the last 7 games. And yeah, look, they concede a lot of chances, but my oh my, do they work hard? Bodies on the line, particularly against Spain. They play the same style. I think they've played the same tactics, setup, formation since before I was born. So you know exactly what you're going to get. Very workmanlike. But the problem is I'm on Lewandowski, and he's, we're still talking about. He feeds off scraps in that Polish team, but he's more than capable of delivering off those scraps. Scored a great goal tonight. Fantastic header. Arguably should have had 2. First touch in that first half took it a little bit close to Simon in the Spanish goal. So I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't do better. And he created one for a teammate. I don't recall his name, but it was bread and butter header. It should have been the equaliser at the time. He got his volley all wrong. So I think with somebody like Lewandowski, that's always the concern if you're backing against, if you're backing the Swedish defence or you want to back against Lewandowski, then it's got to. These situations sometimes have a way of come back to bite you, and look, Poland are still there, so they need to go out. And if you can close up those gaps between those midfielders, those support midfielders, and Lewandowski, and Poland begin to be a lot more expansive, and they're pressing higher up the pitch, they do look a lot better. And it's hard to back against one of the best strikers in the world on the back of the season that he's just come off, and the fact that he's just opened his account for this tournament. So yeah, and for Spain, well, you know what, I might go against popular opinion, but wow, what a boring team they are to watch.
Yeah,
absolutely. I just do not enjoy watching Spain. Look, it's all nice and pretty on the eye. Well, let's play, 1,000,001 passes, but let's be decisive. Let's break those lines. And Morata works hard. Moreno worked hard, but they're just not clinical enough. I mean, Morata's record actually is fairly decent in terms of, I think he's got 17 and 33. And 20 in maybe the last 40, something like that. But it just, he should have had about 80 during that time, judging by the amount of chances that he's missed. And of course, he missed the penalty this night against Poland, which keeps them in the running. Oh God, I just don't like Spain. The truth be known, so again, the 2 big question marks for me there. I cannot commit fully on either. All of these picks tonight for me are going to be, they're going to have an element of doubt associated with them, whether it's can the team get a result or whether they're going to be in that starting 11 or not.
That's a very fair point. And just to kind of clear that up, Morata missed really good opportunities tonight. 0.54 XG and 0.43 XG shots in that game. I think the problem with them is almost it's tiki-taka, but going back to the roots that were the problem in the first case. Guardiola has developed that beyond just tiki-taka, whereas they're kind of almost regressed back to its infancy and the problems associated with it. If you sit deep, if you block it out, then they're not really getting those opportunities to score. But tonight, I think it was just finishing that let them down. They don't have a good enough striker. We covered England, and I think with Germany, Gosens is the one that I would go for. His heat map is ridiculous. I don't know if you've seen it, Ben, but it's basically him as a left winger. 4 chances created, too big, and 1.58 XGI in the 2 games that he's played. Ridiculous numbers for a defender. He's basically out of position. But let's move up into another position, midfield. I like the shout of De Bruyne. I don't know what you're thinking on that one as Ben.
Look, his second half performance against Denmark tells you everything that you need to know. He's a player who will need and want minutes under his belt. So I think Martinez will throw him in from the start in this last group game. And he's got a bit of a point to prove, hasn't he? He is the talisman. He can drag this Belgium team up by its collar and raise them to another level. We see it week in and week out in the Premier League. And it doesn't seem to matter the quality of opponent. We still have the same level of De Bruyne. We talk about players in the Premier League who we subjectively assess as being world class, as great. They go on the world stage and they go with their respective national teams, and they never replicate the same level of performance or the form. With De Bruyne, it transcends everyone. You have an 8 out of 10 minimum, week in, week out, regardless of the competition and regardless of the team with Kevin De Bruyne. And an 8 out of 10 is a bad week for him.
Yeah, it's so true. So you're saying then he's worth the gamble, and I agree with you. I mean, I think that he'll want to be out there, and I think it will give him that little bit of sharpness going into the more competitive knockout stages. There's 2 Ukrainian midfielders that I think people should and have kind of considered this week. It's just kind of a toss-up between which ones that you like more. Yarmolenko has had the 4th highest shots in the box so far in the tournament, and he possibly might be on penalties after Malinovsky missing it, but I'm not too sure about that. They might just stick with the fact that Malinovsky is the taker and just continue from there. But Malinovsky himself could be a cheaper alternative, and there's a lot of positives to him, arguably maybe more so than Yarmolenko. One of the big kind of strengths of the Ukrainian team has been their set pieces, and so far in the tournament they have the best XG and XA from set pieces, and he has also, Malinovsky himself, the most chances created so far in the tournament and 3 big chances created. So he is probably going to get assists in that last game, and I think he's a good one to hold and have going forward. And then the last one that I'm going to throw to you, Ben, before we get on to the attackers, is Havertz. I think a lot of attention has been on Gnabry, but his underlying data hasn't been great. Whereas Havertz on the pitch, in terms of his busyness, in terms of his involvement, has been great. But also his underlying data. He has the highest XGI of all German players. And looking at him today, he was almost like another striker who was sniffing round that goal. And all his XGI accrued today's game was in terms of shooting on goal. So there was hardly any XA. It was all from shots on the goal. I think that there's a few good opportunities there, Ukraine and German midfielders. I mean, do you have any other favourites that you'd throw in there?
No, I mean, I was on the 2 Ukrainians in Matchday too. And going forward, I think Yarmolenko just gets the nod over Malinovsky. He's the skipper, and he's pushing for that all-time leading goal scorer for his country. I think he may be 6 or 7 off that now. So there's that incentive, to push him. And because he's a skipper and the captain, he's got the armband. I think he'll start. So there's those minutes there. And Havertz, again, another player that's sort of come under the radar. Didn't have a great start to his Chelsea career, but you talk about a player who's coming into form at the right time, and we've seen his Champions League performance against Manchester City. He obviously got the winning goal there. And yeah, again tonight against Portugal, he was there or thereabouts. I think him and Goossens were the standout performers. So definitely worth some serious consideration.
I've got two differential ones and then maybe ending on a question here, but I think you always like it when I throw you differentials. First one is for, and I think, your differential dinnery. Well, this is differential dennery. It's somebody from Denmark. It's Martin Braithwaite. Now, obviously, we've said that we're not too enamoured with Danish players, but if you are going to plumb for a Denmark player, then he's probably the best one. He could have a good game against a poor Russian side. He's been unlucky so far with his shots not going in. He has the highest XGI and I think XG of all Danish players. He's been massively unlucky, but he's looked busy in those games as well. The thing is, the Russian team, though, as we said, might, physically and just try and thwart them without any opportunities. So the other differential one that I wanted to put to you was Briel and Bolo. Going into that game, Switzerland probably can be almost a little bit positive because they're playing a terrible Turkish defence. Looking at it himself, he has 3 chances created, 3 big. He also has the highest XG, and XG of Swiss players. So I think with him, there's almost the double opportunity there. If he's not scoring, he'll be assisting. And also there is the fact that Turkey have just been so bad. In fact, the Turkish defence is second worst only to Macedonia in terms of XG conceded over those games. So looking at it, I think that it could be a good game for Briel and Bolo. The final one that I wanted to put to you, though, is I fancy Italy having a really good game against Wales, but who's going to start up front for them? Is it going to be Immobile, or is there going to be too much rotation there? Is that one just a total avoid? Because I don't think that... I think that Wales did really well in that game to win, but I'm not sure if they have the quality to stop that magnificent Italian stallion team.
I think both teams would be happy, would take the point, would walk away with that. So regardless of how those teams set up, will those 11 players on the pitch, be really committed to going out and getting that victory and really pushing hard for it? Like I say, a draw suits both. I think even just in the wider circle for the Italians, I think they're on 29 games unbeaten now. Now the national team record of any time is 30. So they avoid defeat against Wales and they equal that all-time record. And then the possibility of going into that knockout phase and surpassing that, which would be a remarkable achievement when you look back at some of those great Italian sides. The 1982 World Cup winners, with Paolo Rossi is one that sort of sticks in my mind. Even the 1990, well, the Baggios and the Scalaccis and this Italian team, you can't take them too lightly. Tipped them as my dark horse, before a ball was kicked. But while I was able to eulogize maybe on the Italians, I've always downplayed Wales, and
haven't we all?
And I expected them to be the whipping boys of this group, so they have surprised me a little bit. I had a lot to say about Bale and Ramsey and how historically you'd look back and you'd think those two are the 2 star players would drag this Wales team up as well. And I question their ability to be able to do so, approaching their twilight years and in limited minutes over this past sort of 12 months. But they showed in the last game that there's still plenty of passion and fight in the tank, and they went out and they got a result. I just don't see the motivation there from either team to really go out and like I say, for the Italians to steamroll them, and Wales would walk away with a point happily. So too many risks for me with that Italian. If I've got a couple of, I think I've tripled up on Italy. I'm happy for them to sit there and take the risk in the punt, but would I be actively going out and seeking Italian assets for this one particular game? No.
And just on the Mbolo Braithwaite differential Dinnery picks as well.
Mbolo would be my pick. He's a player that I looked at after the first game. Had a lot of shots on target accuracy. The Swiss, aren't great, but for reasons I've already outlined with Denmark, I'm just thinking maybe their race has already run, and Mbolo. There's been a lot of talk about this kid for a lot of years. Picked up a couple of serious injuries at pivotal moments in his career, which maybe have hindered him. But he'll want to go out there and prove it on the biggest stage and fulfill some of that potential. So he's a good player. He's got a bit about him, so I do like him.
Yeah, I do too as well. That's why I put him on there. Braithwaite, I think, is a bit too much of a risk, though, so I would avoid that. But I just put it in there because some people are talking about the Danish team as possibly going out there with a fight, and I hope that they do. I really hope that they do. So that is the end of our discussions there. I hope that you've enjoyed that, and that is the wind up there to match day 2. We're looking forward to match day 3 and then going into the knockout stages. We wish you the best of luck. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like and comment in the video below if you have any disagreements or if you have any requests for us. We always look forward to a data or an injury request and any info that you need. But for now, I'm just going to wish you the best of luck going forward. I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Yeah, cheers, Jason. Keep those numbers coming. If you haven't been following either my social media channels when I'm retweeting, then you should be heading across to Mr. McKenna. He is producing a boatload of stats, both pre-match and post-match, to back up these videos, and they underpin all of the content that we produce. The guy is an absolute beast of a stat man. So yeah, make sure you're following. And why aren't you? You should be doing it. Anyway, for now, good luck everybody in match day 3. We will be back at the end of those next round of games and looking ahead to the knockout stages. So thanks for following. Hear from you all soon. And yeah, goodbye for now.